Welcome everybody to today's council meeting, Thursday, 28th of March. And I'd remind everybody that we are live streaming, so welcome to those who are streaming in. Thanking you all for your interest in council, especially at a time when we are getting issues around long-term plan sorted by citizens, etc. So thank you for that. I have apologies. We've had the council prayer. No, we haven't.
This morning.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
Yes, we had the council prayer this morning at finance. So we'll take that as read. And we have no public forum, but I have apologies from Councillor Duncan, Councillor Morn, and an apology for lateness from Councillor Rokawa. Any further apologies? She's there. You're not late at all. Congratulations.
That's quite.
I'm reading from my script, obviously. So, could somebody move that those apologies be accepted? Thank you, Councillor Carter. Thank you, Councillor Wong. Seconded. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. We have no public forum. And please, as always, if you have a conflict of interest, you can declare it either now or when the item comes up for consideration. Are there any conflicts that you wish to declare now? Right. In terms of item number 5, the confirmation of order of business, I've been told from staff that we can take it as read in the council agendas. Thank you very much. I'll move to the minutes of the last meeting, and before I go through looking for alterations and corrections, I'd like to thank Deputy Mayor Dave Wilson for chairing while I was in business in Wellington. Thank you very much, Councillor. I understand from all my spies you did a magnificent job. Some of those spies were online, by the way, so that was great. So looking for alterations and corrections, pages 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and 11, 12 and 13, 14, 15, 16. Councillor, happy to move that be a true and correct record. Thank you, Councillor Wilson moving, seconded. Thank you, Councillor Loudon seconding. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. Moving through to item 7, follow-up actions from previous meetings. And as I wasn't at the meeting, I will take guidance from councillors. These issues that you have with regard to the items. Give you a minute to refresh your memories of them. Councillor Carter, which item?
I think you can guess. Item 12.
Yes.
Any progress?
No, but I continue to ring companies. Whenever I'm at Te Matapihi, I've yet to be there at a time when there are not heavy transport flying through the bus lanes. And I've rung numerous companies and suggested that they stop using that practice, and I've suggested we will start issuing fines as a warning. Councillor Loudon.
I was there last Monday, a week ago, and I witnessed 2 truck and trailer units, both empty, fly off Criterion Street over the footpath corner and through the bus lane at speed. And I didn't have enough time to see who they were, but it was quite scary for our local public. They went across the footpath. They didn't sort of slow down at all.
If you see something like that, and if you can detail the time and the name of the company, I will follow up and make the company's concerned. And most of the companies, to be fair, most of the companies that I've spoken to at senior management level have said we will immediately send out a note to our drivers that they are not to use this practice. And they're apologetic, and they've said that they will impose severe sanctions on their drivers, they continue to do it.
Do we have to wait till someone gets injured before something happens, or?
I've brought this
Like a
matter,
wait and-
I've
wait
brought
and
this
see
matter to
game?
council on a number of occasions, councillor. My concerns around this, I believe it is a priority for us, councillor Wong.
Item 7, Otara Bridge. Thanks to the team for updating the websites at the Taieri site. It was great to see. And it wasn't on the Mero 2 site, I noticed. So. Well done.
Councillor Dalgety, further with regard to this bridge, I presume?
No.
Anything else relating to that bridge before I close that item off? No, councillor Dalgety.
Just item 4, the water strategy, which has been closed off. But I see in our previous minutes of the previous council meeting that it was saying that the pump testing has still not been received, the analysis around that. So I just wasn't sure what that actually meant.
Any comments from either management or the chair of assets?
Just a question, you're talking about the water tests, water quality results, we have received those, if that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, and then in our previous minutes to this meeting, to the previous council meeting, the comment was made, the pump testing has still not been received. And the minutes have just passed.
Staff, close.
And I wondered what that, that's one
We
question.
have provided the analysis.
Yeah. So what does that comment mean? The pump testing has still not been received and the minutes have just passed. Page 14.
We've had flow rates, we've received the flow rates. Pump that all in through.
Go back.
So pump.
So this is page 14 under Marton Water Strategy, but pump testing has still not been received. So what's the requirement for pump testing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Might have to catch me up on the question.
It's just to this one here, it's testing is still not been received.
Oh, yeah, it has been received, the report. And we can share that with the elected members. It has only been received like last week or so.
So when you say it's been received by staff, but it hasn't been circulated to councillors. Is that
Correct.
the point?
Yeah.
Does that answer your
No,
question?
Can you just explain to me what it would be, what is it? What's a pump test about?
It's about the volume that you can achieve with the bore and how much volume we can get out of it.
Right, thank you. Yes, board, can we,
So you're happy, and will you circulate that information to councillors?
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further?
With the risk of going backwards, just on the Bulls bus lane, somebody who I think it might have been around this table pointed out that there's actually no sign that says no trucks.
Okay.
And just wondering whether that's, a short-term fitness of view, was it somebody did anyway?
Yeah, that was, through you, Chair, that was myself, and I just wonder if the signage down there, and clearly this is a matter which is concerning a number of the councillors and particularly residents of Bulls as well. But the signage down there isn't actually strong enough. It simply says no buses. That simply says buses only. And I think there's some stronger signage, may be some small way to start a process to help improve this issue.
Well, my memory is that there is a sign with a picture of a truck with a great big cross through the middle of saying buses only.
Sorry.
Sorry, your worship, it simply says buses only.
It's just as.
Okay. So to take your point, councillor Carter,
Yeah, I thought there was a signage, as you were saying, but I think a couple of the signs have been removed.
they've been removed because they were there, I was sure. So I'd be interested to know is who has removed them. Because I was certain that they were there as well.
It's a truck driver.
Sorry.
I'll follow that up, put it on action or something.
Thank you very much. having gone back and now back to where we were, thank you, Chief Executive. Any further actions that you wish to go back to? No, thank you. I will move on. In terms of the mayoral report, first of all, an apology. Yeah, sorry. Happy to move, seconded, councillor Rakawa, those in favour? Aye. Those against, carried. Item 8, Mayor's report, just an amendment and apology to Bronwyn Trude, not Barbara Trude, that is my error. And I apologise for it. She is quite a unique person in Taihape, and I've done her a disservice. I have a number of comments to make before I take any questions around either my comments or my report. First of all, I haven't reported back to on the Zone 3 meeting in Gisborne. What I would like to happen is to receive and give opportunity for the councillors first, because I was accompanied by Councillor Okawa. Councillor Okawa, you spoke beautifully to the remit. Congratulations on that. Thank you for being there. Councillor Dalgety, Councillor Duncan also came, as well as our Chief Executive. But the timing, we need to give myself and councillors a bit of a break here to allow time to put their thoughts onto paper. So presumably those reports will come back to the next council meeting.
Well, Coral have done hers, and we're waiting on the other two councillors.
Councillor Rakawa, if you have yours done already and want to report on it, I'll give you the opportunity in just a second to do that.
I could wait for
You'll wait.
that.
Okay. Please remind me, make sure I get this right this time. But in essence, Zone 3, it was a 6.5 hour drive to get there. And a whole lot of that is the difficulty about travelling between Napier and Wairoa. And I think we counted 9 sets of red lights and had to have flashing lights ahead of us. And you see firsthand the destruction, Cyclone Gabrielle. And people that flew in said that flying into Gisborne, seeing the land destruction, they say, is unbelievable. So they're up against it. And there were 2 remits, and they were both passed. And we've got a remit discussion with regard to one of them on today's agenda, but they've been carried forward. So there will be an opportunity for those remits, having gone to local government conference, will be discussed at length before going, hopefully, to central government. I'd like to thank the councillors for the help and the number of long-term plan meetings we've had. Some have not been attended well, but especially once we've got out to the hinterland and the north of the district, the attendance has been very, very high. And certainly there's been a number of people saying that in the rural areas in particular, say we are hurting and we want, for instance, our roading looked at, those sorts of issues. I'd like to thank all the councillors who've been involved in this, but a special thank you to Councillor Jill Duncan. So for a number of the meetings, she has gone and rung the community, and I think Councillor Dalgety and others have done some of that, but her performance has been exceptional, and I thank her for that. I went to the Meet the Candidates night, which is not on, I think, full list of things where I've been in places. There was a surprisingly low number of people that will vote on these positions bothering to attend a Meet the Candidates night. Hopefully because they know one of the candidates incredibly well and have a working knowledge of those others to make an informed decision. But the time frame will be fairly tight from the close of the election process, induction of the new councillor formally, and consideration in the long-term plan. So I will take any questions around where I've been and why, and my report. Open up the floor. Councillor Rakawa.
Your worship, just want to acknowledge what you said in the first part of your report. I would like to acknowledge that too for the passing of Andre Mason. As being as Sarai was part of council, part of track as well. Just a mihi out to her whānau. Kia ora.
Absolutely. I also attended and the unveiling of Koru Mark Gray on last weekend. So Mark has been involved in local government, especially in Taihape, under the pre-1989. I think he stood again for council. An absolute true gentleman, and someone whose opinion I highly respected. But yeah, it's right to know these people. Any further questions or comment? No? All right, I'll move on. I'll move that the mayor's report be received. Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Carter was first. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. As part of the councillor's, my mayor's report, we need to move that a councillor, someone, be appointed to take over the vacancy of the representative on the Sport New Zealand Rural Travel Fund. So with the resignation of Councillor Kalkin, there's a vacancy there. I could have just appointed, but I think there should be a council decision. I'm looking for nominations to that and shows of interest. Councillor Derrick, you can nominate yourselves, by the way, if you have an interest in this field. That's not an insensitive thing to do.
Is it an option to nominate the new councillor to be?
It could be an option, but I'd advise against it, because the only way you could do that would be deferring it, because you're looking to appoint a person and you cannot presume obviously as to who would be elected. Councillor Wilson, you've been in this space a little bit before. Would you?
Yes, I have, Your Worship. Thank you. And unless there is no other councillors looking to fill this role for the remainder of the term, I would be happy to take it on unless somebody else wants to do it, just to get this one tidied up.
And we can always have that democratic thing called a vote. So you're expressing an interest. Are you nominating yourself?
I'm happy to nominate myself to it because it's a space that does need to be filled. Yeah.
Looking for a seconder to that. You're seconding Councillor Pikitiora. A call for further nominations. No, then I consider that I'll move that Councillor Wilson be appointed. I could have a seconder to that for me, so Pikitiora has effectively seconded that. I don't think this needs speaking to. I will be happy to put that to the vote. All those in favour?
Aye.
Vote against? Carried. Thank you very much. Thank you for taking it on. Moving to item number 9, this is the Chief Executive's report. First of all, just before while it's thinking, could somebody move that it be received? Thank you, Councillor Dalgetty. Councillor Wilson, those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. And I'll pass them through to you. I'll still be thinking. This is like hot potatoes.
It is. Okay, thank you. I'll take you through each section of the report like we normally do. Just noting that as per previous conversations around the events held across the district, we have noted a couple there that we are aware that have happened, but we did not receive any paperwork for them. So we'll try and capture those in that way if we have not received the appropriate paperwork.
I'll just ask a question. What's the reason why you haven't received the paperwork?
We would have to ask those two organisations why they didn't submit them. As we said last month, it actually helps our planning and it helps us to make sure that rubbish bins are empty, grass is mown, and that if we do receive those. So I suppose it's more putting it the other way, that if we don't receive the paper, we can't ensure that everything on those sites is actually done. So. And the next section is staff onboarding, offboarding, and also health and safety. If there's any comments on those sections.
There was you might want to point out, there was a whakatau book and those new staff.
We have a whakatau it's every 3 months, and we try and capture staff who have started within that time frame or haven't formally been welcomed before. We had that yesterday at Whara Evening.
Thank you.
Moving on to submissions, you'll see during the month we did, under the Mayor's signature, make a submission to the Ministry of Primary Industries, and that was mostly mimicked on both Taitura and also Manawatu District Council, who undertake a lot of this function on our behalf. One that is still on our radar to look at is the GPS for land transport. So that one closes next week. So hoping
Next Tuesday. So there's some, I've done quite a bit of work on this for other organisations, like hopefully for the staff, the one from council. Can we have advice on where that's at?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, Yano's doing his best to pull something together today to have to you so that you've had a chance to review it.
Yeah, thank you. I know that the closing date is Tuesday, but I'm sure that they will accept submissions after that date. So if it takes an extra day to put it through and get it out circulated, then I'm sure that they. I'd like to meet the timeframes, don't get me wrong, but I understand the pressures.
and then just moving down to the fast track approvals bill.
Can we just
Sorry.
hold the bus a second?
Yeah.
So there's a couple of things that I'd like to point out. First of all, the Resource Management Act Amendment Bill sitting with the MFE this year. I know that there's no dates on that. But this one, the bill to change the hierarchy of the obligations created by under Te Mana to Y is a very, very important one. So the national government have all the way through said that the principles of Te Mana o Te Y will be accepted and adopted. And they've said that in the public arena. If this is a bill to change the hierarchy, so essentially, and perhaps Councillor Rakawa, Councillor Piro will have something to say on this, but essentially this lists the priorities of water use for our water streams in New Zealand. And the first priority is the mana of the water and its life-sustaining facilities, and that you cannot degrade it in any shape or form. And very, very limiting is the wrong word, because it's a fantastic position to be in for a country. And the second use of priority of water is from memory and the sustainability of life effectively. And the third priority, you start to get down into the use of water, for instance, for livestock and agriculture and production, and finally into the recreational uses of water. Have I got it reasonably correct, Councillor?
Well, I'm not being 100% into all of that, but it sounds pretty right. And I would have thought that the first layer of that, right at the top, that should be something that we all, that this whole country, anyone attains to want to get.
So I just don't want this to drop off the radar, and we deal with it at the last moment, because it's relatively important for all of our sectors. You know, for instance, our agricultural sector, this may well, for instance, limit the use of water in terms of irrigation and production. And for some operations, that could be quite limiting. And I am surprised if they're looking to change that hierarchy as stated in our report. I'm surprised as to where this could go. The other one that I'd like,
Now, before you move off that,
yeah,
the latest advice from Tai Tuara, and that's where we get this information from, is this is being looked at potentially by the end of 2024 or more likely during 2025, and that's their words around the hierarchy. So this is certainly one that will just stay on that list until it comes through.
still on this,
Yeah, just briefly, having just been through the process of getting water consent, I can assure you it is incredibly how open to interpretation those principles are. And that is going to cause an absolute huge problem to the agricultural area unless there's more definitive lines placed in what's interpreted as those three.
thank you, councillor Lambert, you're quite correct. Anything further with regard to that submission? The other submission I wish to bring to your attention that is not listed, is the first one is the submission to Horizons long-term plan. So Horizons go out the long-term plan. They've just released it in the last week, I think. I've received copies of it. We should be submitting to it. There are a number of people, especially within the agricultural sector, that feel as though the Horizons will be placing pressure on our farming and agricultural sector ahead of and taking a position ahead of a government position, which is probably an unusual position to take. And I've got to be careful I don't just outright criticise another authority, but we should be submitting on these things as they have the right and should be submitting on our long-term plan.
So we are submitting on it. That actually came out after I drafted this report, but Katrina is pulling the submission together, and in particular around the high productivity land mapping and funding, and then other aspects. So we are definitely submitting on that one.
Yeah, thank you.
Not till it's 22nd of April. Yes.
Yeah, so we have time to take that back to council as well. With some of these submissions, I'd be very keen, if we need to set up a delegation of councillors to be able to approve a submission. And would council be happy if we need to go down that track in terms of time frame? Would council be happy if I took expressions of interest from councillors and we used a delegation to be able to do that? See some nods. Would there be anybody against that in principle in terms of best use of time?
And the other opportunity is to bring it to policy planning. Katrina's happy to take feedback at the policy planning committee meeting if that would work.
Okay. Either way,
Okay.
we'll use whatever mechanism is required, I think. Councillor Dalgety.
I believe one of the significant issues out there, which I wondered if, is it okay to mention this now?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'll test the waters. I'll stop you if I need to.
Is that even within Horizons themselves, different staff are using different slope maps. So when someone is looking at a slope map, it can have contrasting slope identification. So that is causing concern in the community.
And that was of interest expressed at Zone as well. So yeah, I'll take on board that comment. Consistent, but consistency of advice within the department is incredibly important. Yep. Anything further on that? No, thank you.
Okay. So moving on to the fast track approvals bill, which is another important one. And Tiffany is pulling together this submission and she will send that out to you mid next week. As she's noted here in the commentary she gave me, this will be largely on technical feedback, the one that is drafted from staff, but it's whether elected members have any view on the makeup of the joint ministers being the decision makers within this. So that might be something you want to think about when that draft submission comes out.
Yes, and so the fast tracking is a separate process, ministerial process to the ministerial decision on the use of the $1.2 billion fund. But effectively, there are similar ministers being used in. Thank you, Councillor Herring.
Can you give me an example of us within the Rangi TK of any type of
Fast tracking?
yeah.
Yes, certainly. It's an interesting one that is raised. For instance, there's been a fair degree of interest around New Zealand and especially in the Rangitikei around solar farms, for example, and the use of predominantly class 1, class 2 land, class 3 land for solar farms. And fast tracking literally means that our council would not be the decision makers. So that fast tracking means that the decision makers will be made by another group, inverted commas, government set that up. So as I understand it, we have applications for solar farms that have come to us or as a consenting authority through the normal pathway, and there are fast tracking provisions that have been granted to some solar farms for similar operations within the Rangitikei. So there's no absolute consistency in my view. That's one of the issues. Fast tracking will still mean that all of the environmental reports will need to be produced, that it doesn't short circuit that, but it effectively rather than being tied up in the courts for a long time, then the decisions will be made. Okay, yes.
Thank you for that example. So that just sort of knocks onto something else in my head around things like wind farms. So that's definitely been a corridor up in the northern area. So that's those are the sort of things that would potentially fit into this.
Just looking across it,
Yeah.
we have planners in the room. I'm not a planner, I'm not an expert, but is there any subsequent information or correction you wish to make?
Yeah, so definitely. So some of the key criteria are that the projects would have to show regional or national significance. So the most likely projects in our districts would be those big renewable energy projects, which could include wind farms.
Okay.
Interesting, because here you potentially have conflicts between two GPSs, government policy statements. So you have the government policy statement on protection of class 1 class 2 land, and a government statement that seems to override that in terms of renewable energy. Yep. Moving.
Great, thank you. So yeah, that submission will come out to you next week for your input. Mangaweka Bridge, just a notification there that's been put onto the heritage list as advised.
Yeah, I've got some comments to make around this as well. Sorry, Galen.
No, if you.
No, but does Galen want to speak first?
No. Thank you.
Yeah. So the bridge has been accepted. When the new Mangaweka Bridge was built, there was an offer of an option, should I say, for the destruction and removal of the old bridge under the subsidy of far rate split between the two councils at the time that the new bridge was built. So the communities either side of the two districts, Winnerton and ourselves, the community said we don't want to do that, that it is the only cantilever bridge of its type left in New Zealand, and we want to form some sort of charitable trust to be able to maintain it. But what I want to do is point out the costs of that were illustrated at the time. So there was a budget associated with that work of $2 million over time, certainly, but some of those costs were regarded at the time as being imminent, including the need for a 2-yearly recycle checking of that bridge. So I would presume that those budget figures are not sitting in our current budget. No, it's a 50-year look at it, but some of the costs are ongoing every year or second year. I just want to make sure that this council is aware of the repercussions of that decision and the implications, and I am not seeing activity on setting up that trust. Prince, do you want to?
I can comment on the Mangaweka Heritage that they did become an incorporated society and signed an agreement with the two councils, but I can't comment on the asset budget.
If councillors wish, I'm more than happy to have through staff circulated the report illustrating it going forward.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, you advised me of this today, so I haven't had a chance to pick that up as to whether it is in the budget at all. But very happy to receive that report and report back.
Thank you. There wasn't an attempt to ambush staff at all. It was just, yeah, no, I know.
Question regarding that. So if you're saying it gets checked every 2 years, and if maintenance is required to maintain that bridge, are we paying for it?
Yes.
That would be my assumption too.
Yes, in other words, we won't be able to even claim the FAR rate on it. So that $2 million over time would be split between the two councils. And by the way, at the end of that 50 years, the report indicates that the bridge will need to be removed.
Just add one more thing, I can also confirm that the maintenance that was scheduled for 23-24 was carried out at the time the new bridge was built.
So the underpinning of one pier that they suggested at the time would need to be done, that hasn't been done.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what the maintenance was, just when I was preparing the submission, I had feedback from Mr. John Jones that the 23-24 maintenance had been done.
Okay, thank you. So in effect, we are continuing to pay for this at the moment. Is that from everyone else?
Yes,
Wilson.
thank you, Your Worship. Also, the importance to remember that the setting up of the purpose of setting up of the trust was to form a body for to obtain funds for the future maintenance of the. So that was one of the reasons of setting the trust up at the time, and as you'll be aware, I was on council when those decisions were made. So that was the purpose of setting the Heritage Trust up, was to seek a body as a fundraising to raise funds for the ongoing maintenance of it.
Perhaps it would be advisable that as an action required that we send the copy of the report and the status of this to the trust and to Manawatu District Council and say, just remember this is either happening and you are paying for it, unbudgeted, or it has to be allowed for. Thank you. I guess that covers it as deeply as we can go at the moment. Yep.
And the last item is the Waimangapapa Road in Taihape, and Mr. Boynton will talk us through this, those roads.
In case you wish to speak to it.
No, I have nothing further to add, thanks. I've reached my monthly appearance on road stopping matters.
If I understand which road this is, This was originally close to us, to a local school. It was never formed, but it also feeds out to an old Marai site, doesn't it?
This area is well beyond that area, that part of the road.
So the consultation with the owners of the land is they see no issues in terms of access.
They have, as in the report, they've advised in writing they had no objections.
Councillor Wilson.
I'm actually looking to move unless you'd like further discussion of it. I'm looking at to move, A, B, and C.
A, B and C. That would be useful because then it's up for discussion. So you're wishing to move as a group?
Yes.
Council A, B and C. Have we seconded for that? Thank you, Councillor Lambert. Seconding, open for discussion and questions. First of all, are there any further questions of council from council? Councillor Lambert.
It's just a tidy up. Obviously, did something spark this, or was it just a routine clean up of the books?
It morphed into a routine clean-up, councillor. It arose as a matter of cross-boundary discussion, historic use of the road by adjoining owners, etc. Refencing project, survey found the anomaly, and as you noted, it's a tidy up.
Classic backcountry farming.
Yes, which has worked for 150 years.
No, just a question of me before I get you to speak to your motion. But the report indicates that there's no mana whenua issues. Have you spoken to anybody to attain that?
No, we haven't. The rationale behind that being that there is no impact upon the waterway. There is adequate public access to the remaining road that will not be stopped, or is proposed not to be stopped.
Which would be the respective iwi? Would be Ngāti Hauti.
Just ask a question. I'm just trying to figure out exactly where this whenua is. So Ohutu, we go across the bridge. And
Oh,
there's
we're well up from there.
oh, it's right up from.
Yes, yes. Adjoining owner is Alistair McLean.
All right.
Well up the road.
Yeah.
And the only thing that I'm a little bit nervous of is when they say that mana whenua had with no difficulties. My understanding was that there was a Marai. I may be incorrect. Councillor.
Is there any chance that we can just, that this can just sit for any amount of time, just so that I'd be interested to take that to understand exactly where that is. The other question I'd ask is, we've deemed it, the council deem it as an unformed road, so it's got its own, what's this, is that the status, is that what it's called? Or is it a reserve or something like, anything like that against that whenua?
No, it would be literally an unformed road, so it would still have its own legal identity. Yeah. Councillor Wilson.
Just interested in the discussion around this, and I wonder if an additional recommendation E could be added, which may ease some of the concerns that you've expressed, your worship, and as I'm hearing from my fellow councillor Vicky Tiora, that perhaps the additional recommendation could be that confirmation that there be no mana whenua implications are confirmed. And perhaps that would enable staff to continue on.
I would agree, and I think it would be wise. That's your motion currently sitting. You would have to give me some words and with approval to second from the seconder to do that.
Pretty much what I said.
Any comment from staff around this and around where we're going with this?
think it's additional to, I think it's D, the recommendation.
D is it?
Because otherwise we're missing D.
D.
But I think that's appropriate.
So councillor Wilson, would you accept D
Yes.
as stated? Councillor Lambert, would
Yeah,
you?
happy to go with D, yeah.
Any further questions?
Just that-
Councillor Rugg?
Sorry, Your Worship, that no mana will be confirmed.
Thank you. Worship. No? Yeah, can I go to councillor O'Carroll first in case there's a question sitting there, councillor?
Oh, you know, in terms of, so I've seen this, the report last month as well, also said that there are no mana whenua implications. Now, if it's a standard that be put in there, this is number 11, but and we're getting told now that it's saying in the minutes that there are no mana whenua implications, but there was no actual investigation done on it. Is there something that can we I know you've got there mana whenua implications. Does it, if it's there, we just go believing that they've done a report every month when this comes up, every time this report comes in, or do we take it out? And or is it? I'm not sure. What I want to say is that it's in here, but it wasn't done. And does that happen every month when this report comes
I
up?
think in terms of a standardised report, having something that shows that it should be looked at is important. And in this case, I've raised the question of have we actually been in touch with mana whenua? The answer is no. So it's appropriate that gets followed through. But and of course, council, as councillors, you're absolute right to question these processes. And I think, personally, I think that if it says that there are no mana whenua obligations, that implies that there's been a discussion with them. Councillor Wilson, do you wish to speak to your motions?
No, I think what's been said around the room pretty much covers the matter at the moment, so happy for it to be put.
Looking for any other speakers to or against councillor Hero?
I'm just supportive of that tact for us to take in this instance.
Yeah, thank you. I've spoken, I think, so you know my view here. Any other speakers?
I'd like to support it too. I think it's very, very important that what Councillor Rakawa has just said gets taken on board, because it's really important that the implication is there has been contact, but there's been no contact, and I'd like to see evidence of contact with iwi on issues like this, please.
Do you need your right of reply, having nobody speaking?
Your Worship, happy to flag that.
What's the vote? Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. We'll move on. Thank you. Item number 10, the reports with decision. This is 10.1, the adoptions of draft signs in public places. Who's taking us through this, please?
Janet.
And finally, a smoke-free and vape-free
Yes.
for consultation. Yes, thank you very much.
Said.
So this report is to request that council adopts the draft signs and public places bylaw as well as the draft smoke-free and vape-free policy for consultation. Both this bylaw and the policy was considered at the Policy and Planning Committee in February, and the committee has recommended that both are adopted for consultation. The committee also recommended that they are also delegated authority to consider the oral and written submissions. I do note this would require an additional Policy and Planning Committee meeting at the end of July. No changes have been made to the smoke-free, vape-free policy post the committee meeting, but there have been there were a few changes requested by the committee to the bylaw. These changes have been outlined in the report. If you do wish to adopt the bylaw, consultation is required. Consultation is not required for the policy. However, the reasoning why we have suggested it's for consultation has been outlined in the report.
Then further you wish to add? First of all, can somebody please receive that? Councillor Hero or Councillor Lambert moving, seconding. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. Questions? Councillors? Councillor Carter?
Is the draft as it is, or can it be altered? Or is it up to?
You can alter it today if you wish, by way of an amendment vote. So do you have an amendment that you wish to make?
Just the wording in one, item 15.1.
I'll just bring it up.
Page 81. A person must not use, ride, bicycle, skateboard, device, mobility scooter in public spaces, in a manner as to be, in the opinion of the council, being dangerous, whatever. Are you questioning the fact of a person walking on the footpath? My question is, who has the right of way?
This is about a restriction as I understand it. So if somebody is using a skateboard or something like that in a manner that will could establish harm, that you have a potential to be able to act within that. Am I close to right?
That's very much correct.
So it's not establishing who has right of way, but if somebody is using a skateboard at speed down a footpath, you could claim that they are putting people in a position of harm.
What I'm trying to get at is, okay, if you've got 10 skateboarders travelling at speed and one pedestrian, who is the nuisance? The skateboarders or the pedestrian? Whereas if you have 20 pedestrians and one skateboarder travelling at speed, who is the nuisance?
If a person is travelling at speed, they're in the wrong. I would say, but they're the one there because they're travelling at speed. They're the one that's likely to cause harm. But ultimately, it would be up to some form of legally of a court process to ascertain in the end cases degree of responsibility.
That's why I'm going to ascertain who has the right of way. In this case, you're saying the pedestrian has, not the scooter.
We have a judicial JP amongst us who's probably come across these sorts of situations.
I think that the effect of paragraph 15 is bicycles, skateboards and mobility devices. So that's what it's targeting. If they're causing a danger to anybody, pedestrian, that's the issue. It's not the pedestrian.
The first 4 words is the person must not use. Or, right, so using like class as walking.
No, using a bicycle, skateboard or a mobility device.
Doesn't say using, it says use.
Not use or ride. So they're not they, bicycles, skateboarders and mobility riders. That's what that heading's for.
No, but carry on.
Councillor Hero.
The first thing that I would say is you need to read the whole thing in its entirety and not just take out the first 3 letters of the first 3 words. Because if you don't read it in the entirety, you're not going to get the context of what it's in there for. So I mean, you could say that if that was going to happen on a footpath, the scenario you've just said, to have 10 skateboarders on the footpath and 1 pedestrian, a footpath is for pedestrians. If you had 20 pedestrians in a skateboarding park, they'd be the nuisance, but you've got, in my mind, councillor Carter, could you please read the whole thing in its whole context as opposed to taking out the first four words?
I think let's not get down to this level.
We love
Councillor,
each other.
thank you, I take your point. Councillor Okawa.
Not to be a half one again, but I see in this report number 6, no mana whenua implications have been identified. Who is mana whenua in the public arena, or is it in the area of the rangitiko?
I can probably speak to that, but I'd be interested in staff's view. First of all, there have been several smoking vaping, which I think this was aimed at initially, this section. Hui, including at Te Pahu Te Araki. Sorry if I've got the pronunciation wrong. So there has been a fair degree of conversation with iwi with regard to this. I'm not sure that it flowed over from there into skateboarding and motorised scooters, but certainly in the smoking vaping space, there's been discussions. Do you wish to comment further?
I can confirm that we haven't engaged with iwi on the bylaw in particular, but there will definitely be opportunities through the consultation process.
Good answer. Yeah, really good answer. It could be brownie points for that. There's probably an Easter egg over there you can have. Councillor Lambert.
Mine's a more simple question. Either inform me or remind me, selling raffle tickets comes under soliciting donations? Walking. I had a question from a member of the public. It's funny this should come up. Do they need permission to sell raffle tickets outside the Woolworths countdown?
Entries that he didn't see.
Yeah, it's yes.
They do. They do. So it's covered by this though, is it? Do they come under soliciting donations?
If they've got, this is my understanding of it, they're going into detail, but if they're obstructing the footpath or doing something like that, then they could be regarded as a nuisance.
Right.
It's whether or not you put your desk right in front of the stop everybody, or you put it up against the, it's. But if there was a complaint about it, then somebody would have to go and investigate, and usually it comes down to a common sense thing.
Right.
But there's enough protection in there, as my understanding, to actually take action if they were doing it in a manner that restricted it. Yeah.
Councillors, to a fair degree, this is an informal process. So, for instance, if there's somebody selling raffle tickets or Anzac poppies outside New World or Countdown, is an accepted practice. But if somebody decides to sell vegetables outside the front wall of Countdown, then Countdown would have a process that they could go through and by way of complaint. Councillor Marton.
Authorised officer, who might that be, or who administers this complaints?
Chief Executive puts on a sheriff's bag.
It'd be nice to see.
Councillor Wilson.
Could I just suggest to all councillors, this is a draft document which is about to go out for submissions. Everybody will have an opportunity to submit. Anybody can submit from anywhere on anything. This is a bylaw proposal that would give the council some ability to act should we receive a complaint of a nature that falls within this bylaw. There's simply nothing more than that. And it is a draft position that's going into consultation.
We need to get to recommendation 3 to establish that the bylaw is the correct process. But are you happy to move that the council adopts without amendment? Oh, sorry, do you have a question, Councillor Hero?
Oh, see, I was going to.
Yeah.
I was going to.
So your question, recommendation 2, I think we'll take this step by step. You're happy to move recommendation 2? Councillor Hero, you second level?
I'm happy to, second.
Second. You do wish to speak to it? No. Any speakers to it? Otherwise I'll put it to the vote. Put it to vote. Those in favour? Those against, carried. The next recommendation is in effect whether we adopt it by way of bylaw, which involves a consultation process associated with it, correct? Is somebody willing to move that?
I'm going to move it.
You're happy to move by way of bylaw? I'm happy to second that. If you wish to speak to it.
I think it's, the information's there, if, yeah, it's. I'm happy to move.
The only question I have, is there a real negative in terms of doing it by way of bylaw? I can see advantages, but
I wouldn't say there's any negative doing it as bylaw rather than a policy. The bylaw actually gives us an opportunity to enforce it if there are any issues, any complaints.
yeah, that's what I said. Happy to put it to a vote. Those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried, so it deals with recommendation 3. And going up along with this, the smoke-free, vape-free policy for consultation, adopting that at the same time as by way of policy. Happy to move, councillor Okawa, happy to second. Wish to speak to it? No. Put it to the vote, those in favour? Aye. Those against? Carried. And 5, that the council delegates this to the policy and planning committee, etc. Happy to move, councillor Okawa,
move
please.
it.
Councillor Wilson seconding. You wish to speak to it, councillor?
No, well done, team. Keller.
Put it to the vote, those in favour? Those against? Carried. Councillor Wong.
May I just ask a question about this bylaws? It gives us the possibility of enforcing the bylaws, I believe. Are the penalties for infringing the bylaws a statute, or do we have a say in writing those as well?
So the way to go about bylaws is actually through the courts.
Yes.
Yeah. So as in we'll start the process of enforcement, but we don't have any way of influencing what the penalties are.
But are the penalties written by
They're in legislation.
in this station? Are they? Thank you.
Generally, it's about $200.
It's up to the courts, but it can be quite a significant monetary.
Yeah. Or the legal matter. First of all, thank you very much, staff, for slotting this in. We've asked for this for some time. We've been embarrassed at local government that we haven't had one, so I appreciate that it has been put into the agenda, and I know that takes a bit of time and work, so.
Thank you. And we just should recognise Michael Hodder did a lot of the background work on the smoke-free, vape-free. Yeah.
And Michael, if you're online, happy Easter. We miss you. So thank you very much for your work on this.
Take the next 3.
Actually,
I'll make one for you.
Oops.
I'll pass it on.
No, thank you. 10.2, the next steps for council-owned buildings on the corner of High Street, Broadway. We welcome from the dark side, councillor Calkin, ex-councillor on the dark side. Thank you.
Thank you. I will take the report and generally as read, but there are a couple of things I would like to highlight. The first is that we have made that offer back to the previous owner as required under the Public Works Act. We have, after a conversation and in writing, confirmation that they have no interest in buying back the property. I will also just note that a bit of a correction around the values of the property. There may be some misunderstanding and I've been misrepresented around the value. So the values of the property and the most recent valuation that was shared in the previous report are actually 422,000. There may have been some confusion that was written publicly about what those values are. And really the crux of the decision that we're looking for today is determining a bit of an outcome and a pathway forward for disposal methods, non-financial considerations versus financial considerations with the weighting. Should we or should we not engage a real estate agent? And a preference for selling the buildings either together as a collective group of 3 or splitting them up and selling them individually or in parcels of 2 out of 3. I can also confirm, just in lieu of some of the information that's come out today, that we have engaged with Mana Whenua to check if there are any implications, and I can confirm that we have had confirmation there are not at this stage.
Was that as a result of a 5-minute text message?
And that is not, that was thankfully proactive.
Sorry, I shouldn't be. So questions? I'll go Councillor Dalgety, Councillor here, or Councillor Dalgety first.
I just wondered if there's been any weighting or consideration around a preference to have the site developed in the short term, so that the property is not bought and just sits like it is now.
State of disrepair.
Yeah.
Through you, Your Worship. In effect, council has made the decision at the last council meeting that they are a surplus asset, which in effect will then trigger the next stage, which is the disposal process. That kind of conversation is the one that you're going to determine today, when you determine whether they are going to be have higher levels of financial or non-financial considerations in those weightings. As a part of that disposal method, we would expect that when expressions of interest, if that's the way it goes, that information will come out and allow us to be able to understand what any potential purchasers' plans are, to avoid what you're talking about as land banking and in effect demolition by deterioration.
I think potentially you're missing the point here, because if I read it rightly, what you are saying is, have there been any consideration to stopping the process, improving the property prior to it being marketed? Is that what you're saying?
No, I was actually what Mr. Carpenter was saying was my query, but I'm happy to hear an answer to your query.
No, I just thought that's what you might be getting at.
No.
Going down that, because
Yeah,
you know,
sure,
if you,
that's an option.
in my view, if you had a view that you want to improve the marketability of the property by doing it up before disposing of it, that would be a cessation of the process at the moment, or a stop until that happened, if it was the view of council. But if you're not wanting to do that, that's fine.
No, that wasn't what I was.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure I got clarity around that.
Sure.
Councillor Hero first, then Councillor Loudon. Councillor Hero.
My question was, you gave the one price, that's for all 3?
The market valuation of 422 is a collective view of all 3 buildings that was valued from a market valuation perspective, March 23, which was circulated at the time through the PMO.
Thank you, Councillor Loudon.
Thanks for the report, Jared, very good. Just the table on at 3.2, page 103, is that the standard table that the council has used in the past, or is this your take on what might we consider?
This is the policy for assets and land surplus disposal. This is the table that lives in that policy. And I do make comment in there that I've actually not made any changes or recommendations of change to that. But that is a decision for council to determine if there are any additions or a change of weightings to those as well. You do have the opportunity to do that through this process.
I think we'll take the time and run through those, hopefully reasonably quickly. Councillor Wilson, Councillor Wong, Councillor Wilson.
Just looking to move receipt of the report so we can start stepping through the recommendations, Your Worship.
More than happy to receive that. Looking for a seconder. Councillor Hero, are you seconded? Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you. So it moves us through to the recommendations, but I will take any questions around the report as we go. And this moves us to the weighting indexes, which are listed on page 103. So, councillors, we'll deal with these. So have you got any direction you wish to advise to council?
No, but we've talked about this one before. One thing that I've been struggling to get in my mind, if somebody comes and offers you $5 million to demolish, how do you balance that with zero, but you're going to have a really impressive mark? And I'm just not sure how that fits in, which is into the weighting index. Just not sure how you can evaluate those if those were the options that come to you.
So my view is that if somebody comes to us with $5 million and so on, and is outside some of those weightings, that does not preclude them. But they're there for consideration of. Councillor Wilson, and I think I've got one of your staff members that would have to come and speak through you if you gave them permission.
Worship, council has in the past set aside this 2015 policy on disposals to suit particular circumstances. So that's always in the background.
So it actually forms a guideline of consideration rather than an absolute position. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what I was going to say. It is a guideline, but this here, when we look at consideration of discussing what these, what percentage weightings apply, is almost a secondary thing to the other decision about what you're going to do or which way you're going to choose to dispose of the buildings. Because depending on which way you go down will have a greater impact on what you may consider as recommendation 2. So I'm almost wondering if members are up with me on that one. I think we've got a decision that's further down the line that may impact what recommendation 2 is, depending on how we choose to dispose.
Would it be not possible, because in this case, to say that in assessing the suitability of a disposal, that the following matters be considered rather than absolute weighting? Would that not be simpler in this case? So in other words, rather than assigning an absolute weighting as a guideline.
Further to my question, I just wonder if we could park recommendation 2 until we've concluded some of the other recommendations, because I think what you're saying falls into that space. It depends on what decision is made in the subsequent recommendations as to where the recommendation 2 may sit and whether or not it's even appropriate.
I take your point, in which case you'd be really dealing with recommendation 3 next rather than 2. I see merit in that. Councillor Okawa, you think you had your hand up?
I did. I just a question. If we, well, I don't know, bypass this or go with the list that you were talking about, what does it, in terms of our audit? Someone come along and say, how did you deal with this building or the council decision you made? Does it affect it? I just wanted to ask that question. If we were going to take this aside and put your list in instead. Not sure.
In terms of relation to this building.
Okay. Just my opinion on that through you, Mr. Chair, is that so long as you clearly indicate what path you've gone down as a council, you'll be fine. It's your decision to make, even if you were to give it away, so long as you've consciously made a decision to give it away and they've had this debate that leads you to that decision, you'll be fine with the auditors. You might not be fine with the public, but
Yeah, I'd agree. Councillor Delgado.
I was just interested if staff have a view on on this list that we're going to make above the weightings. What do you think about that process?
Sorry, could you just clarify when you say the list, are you talking about the weightings? And if we have a view on whether they're appropriate?
Well, his worship was talking about, basically making a criteria list before we go with whatever weightings. As per the page 103. And I just was interested if that was a sensible way of doing it from your perspective.
If I may, I think the intention would be to, depending on the disposal method, as Councillor Wilson has touched on, if it was to be via expression of interest, that would allow any of the expressions of interest we receive to be then brought back with a scoring against each one of these attributes and the significance that you've put alongside them. It's still your decision to decide which of those you feel most appropriate. It's not a case that we would only bring you the top scoring expression of interest or tender. They would all be scored against the same methodology, and it would be again your decision to determine which one of those was the one you wish to proceed with.
And I take, because I've been thinking this through, in this case, I think you've validated my thought process. Councillor Wilson, I think it is better that we go to recommendation 2 first, because whichever pathway is being used, there is still a validation against these principles. So irrespective of what process, the same principles apply. So in the second one, I've dealt with Councillor Loudon, we'll come back to 2. Councillor Loudon.
Yes, on point 2, one of the difficulties of this group of buildings is the financial input that needs to be made to actually rectify them to any degree. And so I feel as though one of the most important weightings is financial viability of anybody, and also the sustainability of the investment, rather than the use of the site. Any change is going to improve the use of the site. This is not used now.
Yeah.
And so, to my mind, having an investor who has financial substance is one of the more important people that we need to be engaging with.
Yeah.
All right, what I think we'll do is go down the list in terms of use of the site. It's a figure of 25%. Personally, I'm fine with that. What it is signalling, to my mind, is that there should be a use per se rather than just a land banking position. Does anybody wish to either increase or decrease it?
Just before we get to the actual percentage, there doesn't seem to be a time restraint on that, so it's a preference of the site. I would like to see the added words take into consideration their timeline. So
yes, I think that any illustration around that would need to demonstrate a timeline associated with it as part of that process. I don't take that as a given. Yeah. So people happy with 25 sitting there? Councillor?
I'm not. I think that having a strong weighting for the use of the site will limit people who have interest in the site, because it's going to constrain them. I think if council wants to sell the buildings, they need to have almost a hands-up approach as to what happens there. I'm not happy with use of the site being 25% high. To my mind, it's low.
What figure would you like?
10, low.
10,
See,
we're gonna get into some sort of Dutch auction, I suspect here, councillor Wilson.
Your worship, that's exactly what I was really trying to, that we do, because we can sit here and play around with these numbers and we'll be here for a very long time. I actually do support councillor Loudon on this one, and I also support on this, the stability of the, investment, it needs to be higher, but I don't think we should be going through and having a look at these, and then we're going to be starting to talk about, are we talking 12.5 versus 13.5, or where do we end up? The point that I'm trying to make here is, do the attributes reflect what our desire is for the disposal of these buildings? And I believe the answer to that is yes. Pending, again, what decision is made in recommendation 3 leads us down a path where we can actually apply these. And I'm don't really particularly want to see a great deal of percentage weighted on any of them, because I think we will end up hamstringing ourselves. I really do.
However, there may be some categories, for instance, that you want to totally rule out. And I have one that I would suggest, for example, that you just take it out as a category. I'm happy to alter the figure here, but I think it may well be useful to have some guideline in there and some weighting factor if you have a guideline.
Also, what council allowed the 10%.
Any other views? In the absence of other views, I'm quite happy to have it sitting at 10%. Moving down, in terms of ownership structure, preference will be given to tenders that are from local businesses, resident groups within the Rangatahi. I would suggest you take that out completely, because whoever purchases this site, you could have, probably I'm going to use a poor example here, but if you had the warehouse want to come into Rangatahi as Rangatahi grows, then you would be could effectively be ruling them out, but they may be the only ones with the financial position to be able to take the stance. So I would move that you take that consideration right out. Councillor Lambert.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think it'll appeal to such a small group of purchasers that it's important. So that's not.
Councillor O'Carr.
Oh, I would say the same for the historical connection too, but we'll get to that. Delete that.
And so if we take out the ownership structure, the next one, sustainability of investment. Preference will be given to tenders that are more likely to use the asset over the long term. Really, really difficult in terms of enforcement. But I take the point around somebody could use it and say that they just want to set up a very, very short time and pop-up type shop or something like that. But that the cost of compliance would be significant. However, am I reading this correctly? You've spent some time about thinking about this. Do you have a view?
Yeah, this particular weighting, my interpretation of it was for you've got a time period in which someone may choose to operate out of those buildings, and then they still need to be made structured sound, which is going to come with some of the other things that we'll talk about around financial viability and things like that. So there may be someone that comes in the short term looking to then sell them on again in the future. So I guess this is where this comes into it. That's what this is addressing.
Councillor Hero.
I would go back to the beginning of what this whole thing's about, of us putting those set of buildings up to be sold. I would have thought that anybody that was putting their hands in their pockets to be able to purchase something like that and making a significant would be making a significant contribution into actually buying the thing for it's 400, whatever the cost of it is. Unless there's, I just wouldn't see that there'd be people that would be out there that just want to go and buy those types of buildings and do nothing with it. I would have thought if you're prepared for that, then what business is it of council as to what? That kind of, I wonder why we're now getting into everything else along with it. If someone wants to sell a building after they've bought it, that's their business, that's up to them. And there are many buildings in this town, in our district, that currently sit there that are not used.
Perhaps the easiest way around this, first of all, forget about the weightings for a second. Who believes that that should be a category that we consider? Is there anybody who thinks that we should have that category still sitting there? Councillor Loudon, do you believe?
I do, because anybody buying those buildings and wishing to invest in them, it's going to take them a long, long time to recoup their investment. So there must be some longer term view that these people have for this set of buildings.
In terms of making that investment, surely they're demonstrating that by making the investment and making it fit for purpose in terms of compliance.
But they won't recoup what they invest for a long time.
That's not the issue. Councillor Wilson.
So it's another one, and I wonder if it's relevant in the interest of a commercial decision to be made to dispose of buildings. I wonder if it's even relevant. It's another hamstring, Michael.
I agree with you. I don't see the absolute need to have that in there. So we've got one view that should remain. How many of the view that so it should be taken out? Have a show of hands, who takes it out? Okay, we take it out. The next one, financial viability preference will be given to tenders which provide evidence of being able to access the financial resources to achieve the intended use project benefit. I'm just wondering how you do that, but is it important? Councillor Hira?
Can I make a comment?
Yes.
My comment is that we built, that this council bought those buildings for a reason. I would say that people could turn around and throw that absolute thing straight back in our faces.
Correct. But we've declared that we don't have a use for them going forward. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, I'm happy that financial viability of any proposal that we may enter into is a strong factor. So I would certainly want to see it stay in. If you're looking for a weighting, I would suggest it's high.
You're suggesting what?
That it's high rather than a medium.
At what figure?
Depending on where depending on what percentage you want to achieve, but I would have said it was a high. 20, 25. I think it's a high rating that anybody we're discussing these matters with, depending again on what negotiation 3 comes out in.
I second 25.
Is there any opposing view?
No.
25 sits there. Thank you. Track records. Preference will be given to tenders to provide evidence of delivering services to a specified level. Yes.
Keen to jump straight into this one, Your Worship, as well.
Yeah.
Again, absolutely.
Yeah.
And critical, and it's a high again. We need to know that it's a track record of delivering whatever may be discussed. Again, depending on the go back to depending on decision or recommendation 3.
Sorry, just a question. These weightings are not, well, yes, they will be publicly. So the potential purchaser will be aware of these weightings.
That's the issue.
Yeah,
Yes.
so it's just going from my mind. We just want anyone to show some interest. We don't want anything that is going to put anyone off it. So let's make this process as easy as we can for anyone.
So I've written in the brackets of my notes and highlighted in pink, keep it simple. Because if I, for instance, if I was personally going to purchase that and make an offer, I don't want to have to disclose all of my own individual company dealings and my financial viability to a group of people to buy what are derelict buildings. I'd be more than happy to illustrate, say, this is what I'm going to do. And if I don't do that, then there's a period of time which my opportunity to move forward is cancelled.
Sorry, you wish, but the only problem with that is that that decision has yet to be made. Again, I come back to item number 3. So if we're preempting the next recommendation.
Whichever way, you're still going to have to consider. So still going to have to consider the purchaser in some shape or form, whether it's by way of tender or expressions of interest. You still come back to it ultimately. That is why I wonder if you just list these attributes, because otherwise you go through this and you're not going to reach 100% now. You're then going to have something that reaches 35% of the decision weighting or something of that nature. And what I'd suggest to council is that you look at these attributes that you may wish to consider when analysing an expression of interest or tender position. And you keep it simple. Through the chief executive, you ask him to speak.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. The policy was established to say incorporate community thought into a commercial transaction, which don't always marry. The policy provides for a proportion of the term consideration value for sale is to be measured in terms of cash, and a proportion is to be measured in terms of the community aspects, the future, etc. Forgive me, Jared, I thought it was 70-30, wasn't it? Or something, that proportion between the weighted and the cash. Regardless, let's say it was 75-25. 75% of any offer was to be cash, 25%, whatever it is, to be community aspects. What we're doing now is to establish the ratio within and between the various agreed retentions within the non-cash attributes. So it really doesn't come down to, if we remove some of these attributes, the actual weighting between non-cash attributes and cash changes. That can only change by the resolution of council setting aside that part of the policy and changing the 75-25 or whatever it might be. So
I was effectively going to end up this sort of position, because when I looked at this and I looked down, for instance, at the last one, historical connection to the asset, and I thought, why put that limitation on? So to my mind, that was going to come out in terms of the ownership structure that we've already got, that was going to come out. And I was going to try and get to the position that with the attributes that were remaining be seen as the non-cash weighting and get down to a ratio between cash and the consideration of the remaining attributes. So effectively, your thought process was a similar process to mine. Perhaps I could come to put a position to you, councillors. So if you took out the ownership structure, if you took out the historical connection to the asset, and the remaining were attributes, and you put a weighting factor of 75% against the value of the offer with a 25% weighting of the remaining attributes. And to do so, you would have to then have a second motion to set aside. So the first question is from staff, if I was going to go down this line and put that as a motion, which is, I think, where we were slowly getting to be honest. Do you see a difficulty in that process? Because I think that we have to keep this simple.
If I may just make comment on that, just for clarity, you can choose whether it's 75% cash or 50% cash or 25% cash. You can make that determination. The policy doesn't state a direction in that space. So it's an open decision that you can make every single time you dispose of an asset. It does make provisions in the policy that if a potential purchaser doesn't meet 35% of the non-financial considerations, then their tender or expression of interest is not taken further. So that is something that's listed. So in effect, you're saying 35% of 25%.
Yeah,
if I understand it correctly.
Effectively, I'd have to do this. I'd have to set aside policy as such per se. Yeah. Councillor Allen.
Does that mean that this is a policy that needs to be changed? Like we are hamstrung by the policy?
In my view, potentially yes. Because it doesn't pay to just routinely set aside a policy. The policy was designed in terms of disposal of assets, for instance, around bulls, especially, in my memory.
Just from my point of view, it still provides a framework. So what you're doing is still establishing where you're wanting to go. Now, remember the first discussion was whether you give it to somebody for nothing, and have this, or whether you give it purely on what their dollar value is. This is making you think about what you actually want it to be used for.
Just the policy in the present form with percentages for significance hamstrings any disposal of any building, because every building situation is different. And whether we're advised to go with what Andy says, that you take out the numbers, you just find the most important aspects to the deal and leave them as an indication of things you'd like to consider, and rewrite the policy first before we go anywhere.
I think we're starting to align really with this sort of thinking, aren't we? So, look, I think the easiest way that I could go about this would be, I will move a motion that with regards to the disposal of these buildings, going to fill that in, that council consider the attributes of the use of the site, sustainability of investment, financial viability, and they'll need to be described separately. The track records and stability of investment when assessing a tender or an expression of interest. Secondly, that the weighting between the assessment of the attributes and the price that be confirmed at, let's say 50-50 rather than 75-25, and to be considered by council. And three, that the recommendation is that the policy with regard to disposal of assets be set aside with regard to this matter. I've done it on the fly here, but it followed that was my thinking when I sort of spent time looking at this. Perhaps if we pull that up and then we flesh it out or disregard.
Or can we just take a break to get the, it was 5 minutes to get it.
Would it be useful to take a stop now? Councillors, maybe we stop, we adjourn for a coffee break now. And we resume at 3 o'clock. That'll give staff the time to think about what I suggested. What do you? Thank you for those back online. Thank you for the break. It gave staff and councillors an opportunity just to turn into words and check recommendations with regard to this item. So, recommendation 2, with regard to the disposal of the buildings in 304, 312 and 314 to 318 Broadway, Marton, council confirms it will consider the non-financial attributes of use of the site, sustainability of the investment, financial viability, track record and stability of investment in assessing the non-financial considerations, and, same motion, the council determines a 50% weighting for financial and a 50% non-financial considerations. I'm happy to move. Councillor Wong, you still can have your second. So I'm opening it up for discussion. Questions first. Questions, Councillor Dalgety.
I'd like to make an amendment.
Yes.
And I would like to suggest that council determines a 75% weighting for financial and 25% non-financial considerations.
Okay, well, you've done more than ask a question, but just take any questions first, and I'll come back to you as an amendment to the motion. Questions? Right, you wish to amend the motion? Am I allowed to speak to it first, or you'd like to amend it as such? I'll take the amendment. So the amendment would read that.
Sorry, Your Worship, just, you do have a question over here prior to taking that amendment, possibly?
I asked for questions.
I have my hand up here.
Sorry, I must have, sorry.
I would question the second part. I think the weighting should be more than what is potentially going to be suggested. It should be 80% non-financial, 20%.
Yes, I've already taken, I'll take the first amendment. If that was to fail, then we could look at an argument around that as a second. So you're wishing to move an amendment to a 75% weighting of financial and 25% non-financial considerations. You wish to speak to your amendment?
I just think.
Sorry, is there a seconder to that? I thought we had one. Is there a seconder to that? Councillor Hebra is seconding. Yes, go ahead with the amendment.
I just think cash is king, and yeah, we should be considering that.
I'll speak against the amendment, and the reason I speak against the amendment is this essentially is a derelict site. And I think we have to bear that in mind. And if somebody comes along and wants to do amazing things with it, but says, you know, for instance, if somebody comes along and says, I'll take that site and that position to do something special on that site, but I'm going to invest $1 million in that site, and do these wonderful things. I just think 75% is just too high. For me personally, so I'm speaking against the amendment. Other speakers? Councillor Dowden.
I'd like to speak against the amendment. I think that council's reasoning to buy this building was to enhance the town. And so I think the non-financial considerations should be high at 80%. The financial considerations at 20%. I feel as though holding onto this building is a risk. And you can see it's already taking up $13,000 a year just rates. I feel as though council's decision is surplus, that it needs to be offloaded.
Any other speakers to the amendment? can see we're going to end up back into a Dutch auction a little bit here. Right, I'll now put the amendment to the vote. That is a 75% weighting on price on and 25% on outcome. Those in favour for the amendment, please raise your hands. Those against? Thank you. The amendment is lost. We now revert to the motion as is. You're wishing to move an amendment?
I move an amendment that the weighting, the first section is fine, that the weighting is 20% financial and 80% non-financial.
Have you a seconded to that?
Yeah, I'll second it.
Second of Councillor Lambert, you wish to speak to him?
Loud and but.
Yeah, I'm looking at.
Yeah, you said Lambert.
Oh, sorry. That's one. What's it?
I think I've said it. I think it's important to recognise that it is a derelict site. It is a risk to council. Hold on onto it. It needs to be moved on. And the intention is to enhance the town, and we need someone that will do that.
The other speakers too, or for, or against?
Yeah, I agree. To shift it on, we need to make it as attractive as possible to, in my opinion, there'll be a very small pool of buyers it'll appeal to, and we have to make it as attractive as possible for them to be involved. So I obviously support the amendment.
Any other speakers? Councillor Wilson?
Look, I don't support this amendment, and I didn't support the previous amendment, because I do come back to my earlier point. It depends on what you're going to do with recommendation 3 as to where these financial ratings have any benefit or not. So I do not support this motion.
You're not speaking to the motion that's on the floor.
I'm not supporting it.
Take that as an either a nay or a yes. Councillor Dalgety.
I'm not supporting this amendment. I am keen to go back to the 50-50 original offer.
I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour of the amendment to 80-20? I'm actually not. So hang on. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The amendment is carried. Now becomes a substantive motion. So I'm prepared to put the motion as I think we've had a lot of discussion around this. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Not just holding out to see your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Motion's carried. Thank you very much. Now we have to deal with recommendation 3. The council choose the method of sale by tender or expressions of interest. If expressions of interest are selected, do you wish to move?
I would like to move that council's chosen method of sale is by expression of interest.
You seconded to that. Councillor Lambert, by you wish to speak to it?
Yes, I will. And to be fair and respectful to my other fellow councillors, I will not reference the previous 2 recommendations and my thoughts on those. However, I think in this particular case, if we consider the previous recommendations, the expressions of interest gives us as a body and staff the highest degree of flexibility to move within all of the parameters of the recommendations that have already been passed by council today. And that's why I think it's the only option that we have left to us out of the 2 that were presented in the recommendation. So that's why I've moved that expression of interest be the best option.
Any other speakers to it?
Obviously, I wholeheartedly agree.
I'll put it to vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Recommendation 4, that council preference is to sell the buildings collectively or individually selecting one, and buildings will be listed for sale in this way. Councillor Wilson,
So I'd like to move that they be sold collectively
as a preference.
as a preference.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Carter, wish to speak to it?
No, your worship.
Does anybody wish to speak to it? Yes, Councillor Wong.
It just seems strange that Councillor Wilson has suggested to be collective when the previous recommendation he moved that because of added flexibility, and by preference for a collection seems to restrict our flexibility. So I would have thought having a preference or a allowing to be sold separately would have added an extra factor to people looking into this.
I'll speak next. This indicates a preference, not an absolute position. But I suspect Councillor Wilson is speaking from a first-hand knowledge of the building. So the buildings have communal walls right through. It is very difficult. It would be a more difficult position to be able to split them into various lots from a structural point of view. Any other speakers? Councillor Dowden, you had your hand.
No, just you've answered the question.
I think yes. And right to reply?
Yes, and you're 100% right, your worship. Shared walls, and in fact, one building particularly has a shared roof space. So difficult to consider an option like that, but preference to sell, somebody may come up with a suggestion how that could be done individually. We could entertain that, I guess, but I think it is a bit of an understanding of what these buildings actually are.
Put to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Recommendation 5, that council staff are instructed to investigate and appoint a real estate agent to the sale of these buildings. Would somebody like to say move? Councillor Wilson, Councillor Hero, do you wish to speak to it?
No, yes, I do. I think that is the most appropriate way to openly and transparently dispose of these buildings, to support an earlier recommendation to do so.
Thank you. The question of staff, if we are going through expressions of interest, you would still advise an independent real estate agent. Thank you. I thought you'd say that.
One thing that's just sort of become apparent through going through this conversation and looking at recommendation 6 there as well, that if you are instructed to investigate and appoint a real estate agent, you then in effect trigger the need for a financial implication as a result of that, which is made in recommendation 6.
I put 5 to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Recommendation 6. This is a $25,000 process, if you like. Looking for someone to so move.
I'm happy to move it so there's can be some discussion around it, your worship.
Are you wishing to change it now?
No, but I'm wishing to ask questions of the recommendation, so that's why I'd like to move it.
Move it. Looking for a second, so it's open for discussion. Councillor Rakawa, take questions around it.
Yes, I just wonder if we look at recommendation 6, the previous recommendation that we appoint a real estate agent to effectively assist with the disposal of these buildings. Why do we need to actually have a figure in there of 25,000 when we don't know what these costs are? I mean, if we haven't engaged a real estate agent, should we not be waiting to see what their expressions of interest are once we've engaged said real estate agent to come back and tell us what their costs are and or what other proposals? There's more than one way to skin a cat. And I wonder if it's premature to be putting a financial figure on it, and wonder if it's even required.
Does staff want to answer that?
Happy to provide a rationale. There has been some previous engagement to understand what the potential cost may be. Given this is a unique situation where typically a real estate agent takes a percentage of the sale price. With the chance that the sale price would not be the market value, given the way that this has been structured, there are other ways to make sure that a real estate agent's time and professional advice is properly remunerated, which has been done previously, and we've got a good indication that the 25,000 would be sufficient to do so.
I'm going to move an amendment to this. And the amendment would be that the proceeds from the sale are to be used to offset the costs of establishing a new building, a replacement facility for council. And I'll speak to my amendment. When we sold buildings, etc., that were surplus to requirement, they were used to offset the cost of TMAP. And we could go forever about trying to find sums for other things. And here's a little bit of cash we're potentially generating. We have a very significant cost that we're going to incur in terms of the replacement of this building. And I think that we should say, we purchased these buildings for this centre to replace this building. We no longer need it, so therefore it should be returned to this project. So I'll move that as an amendment. Thank you. Looking for a seconder to that. Councillor Dalgety, you second it. Sorry, I've effectively spoken without the seconder. But I think there's a matter of high principle here. And rather than just using it for another purpose that is useful to somebody without absolutely establishing what it is as well, I think it's poor practice. Looking for other speakers.
Happy to support your amendment, your worship, but I think we need to be realistic here. The proceeds to be allocated is probably a fairly moot point in what we may actually be dealing with from a numbers point of view. And maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but I think we need to be realistic to what we're potentially looking at once we've gone through this process and seek some expressions of interest. We may not be talking large sums of money, so I would just make that as a point to note.
Any other speakers before my right to reply? I think it's not a matter of money. I think it's a matter of principle. This was bought for a project and we should return it to that project. I've moved. So I've now had a right to reply, vote on the amendment. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Now put the substantive motion back. Those in, councillors, are you happy if we put it to the vote? Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Is that all we need to do with regard to this item? Thank you. Thank you very much. I appreciate the way it's been put. And the perfect world in hindsight, maybe we should have workshopped this to take it out of this discussion area. But it's important for the people online to see the process that we had to go through as well. So I think it had merit as well. Moving to 10.3, the proposed remit relating to the Maori ward. First of all, could somebody move that it be received? Thank you, Councillor Hero, Councillor Rokawa. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Councillors, either Hero or Rokawa, do you wish to speak to this?
I'd just like to say there could be times through this short process where I'll be asking for some input from Councillor Rokawa, but how this has come to our table, the Rangitikei District Council's table, is at the end of February, which is nigh on 5 weeks ago. Councillor Okoa and myself attended a hui that was held down in Foxton, with a number of Māori ward elected members from Ruapehu District Council, Manawatu District Council and the Horowhenua District Council. And we also had apologies from the night. One of the things that was put on the table for us is a discussion. So the reason that the meeting had been called, so it was actually the first face-to-face meeting that we'd had. But one of the kaupapa that had been put on the table was a remit to be put in, and it's everyone's got the remit in front of them, regarding the LGNZ law bringing central government to ensure that Māori wards and constituencies are treated in the same way as other wards, and that they should not be subject to a referendum. So one of the people that is one of those elected members from the Manawatu District Council also sits on Te Maruata. Te Maruata is made up of elected Māori members, and they kind of sit alongside LGNZ, and she was the one that brought that to us. We came up with a name for ourselves. Te Pai Tawhiti was the name that was given to the group, and actually Horizons elected members were also in it. So we were fortunate in that when we turned up at the meeting, the remit had been already put together. As far as at that meeting, we were told that for us to go back to our respective councils. So we were bringing it back to here. Horowhenua, we're going to be putting it into their council. Palmerston North, we're putting it into their council. Ruapehu, we're putting it in as well. So that we're doing it in a collective way. And because of the connect with the Manawatu Māori ward member in Te Maruata, this was something that was going out across the country. So not just going to be here. Here within our Horizons district. So we would be, I would be hopeful, not hopeful, I'm sure that we have support, but the kaupapa had to come and be laid on the table for councillors to read and to absorb as to what the intent of the remit is. I'd just like to ask if Councillor Raukawa can give some feedback, given that this remit was actually put into the Zone 3 meeting that was held up in Gisborne, and I understand that she spoke to it. Hilda.
Thank you. Councillor Okawa, do you wish to respond?
Yes, thank you, Worship. So up at the meeting, up at Zone 3, when the remit was spoken, before I say that, Sam, I hope I get his name right, Marton, is he the LGNZ? Yes. Chairperson, he got up and he mentioned this remit and said that, there didn't need to be a remit at that meeting, but because LGNZ were had brought it up, or we're bringing it up at National. However, some of the Māori councillors that were there said even though it may still be at LGNZ, we still wanted to talk to the remit. So Rowley Fitzgerald, who represents Manawatu Horizons, he got up to speak to this remit that you see before you. I was able to get up and speak for it, as well as Horowhenua District Council Justin Tamihana. He spoke to it. I think on behalf of, I think I I seconded that. But I spoke to the remit and said that along with, as what we've done as council, that Rangitika Council has supported the Māori wards, and that we do have too, and that we support this remit, that in all fairness and equity, that if Māori wards go up for referendum, we shouldn't, because if the other wards don't have to, then. So that went up. I spoke to that and said that I had talked to the mayor and Jill, Councillor Dalgety and Councillor Duncan before I got up to speak, to make sure, to tell them that this is what I was going to do. Was that okay? And to support this remit. So yes, it did get the full support from everybody there. There was only one abstaining, which was Manawatu District Council, because they had only got the remit the night before. They got it late. They needed to talk to it in their arena. So, but everybody else that was there supported the remit, which was actually, thinking of all the councils there, off the top of my head, I couldn't give you the whole lot of them. Gisborne,
All of zone.
All of zone 3.
Zone 3. Councils from Gisborne through to Taurua, New Plymouth through to somewhere else and everywhere in between. Councillor Hira.
I just wanted to add on to that feedback from Councillor Irokawa to say that when we came initially to speak to the Mayor about this kaupapa, the suggestion was to put it on the table for our February meeting. And there had been back and forwards, kōrero about well, whether or not it needed to be there. The thing that took that whether or not, because of the time frame and putting it onto the agenda, it needed to happen. What I want to say about that is actually the whakaaro that came back, the thought that came back was about giving it its mana, and so I was actually quite happy about it not necessarily being put up at that time, because I believe it needed to have its own mana. And so I just want to, from my point of view, I was happy for it to come here. And the other thing I want to say to the councillors around the table, potentially you could think that with Councillor Irokawa going through the process of seconding it, she'd seconded something that hadn't actually been around this process. And so I get it that people might not necessarily have thought that was the way to go. Engari, that's what happened. So we're putting it out there for support from you, our fellow councillors, to support it, even though it's already been through the process at Zone 3. Andy, have you got a thought about this?
Just additional to that, the circumstances were what they were. However, ahead of the Zone 3 meeting, I also circulated to all councillors the opportunity for someone that could have a contrary view. And there were no contrary views from councillors, as opposed to that there were councillors saying things.
Thank you.
So that gave the confidence to be able to say that it has, in a couple of different ways, been put in front of council. I guess from here, councillors, would one of you like to formally move at this council meeting that you supported the remit, just to tidy this up?
Well, I will if I can.
Happy to move.
Yes.
You happy to second, councillor? Yeah, at this meeting, which is separate.
Yes.
I'll put it to the vote. Unless there are questions around it. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. And thank you, Councillor Hero, for the way that you conducted yourself and so you did us proud. So, Councillor Marton. Must be time. That's twice. That's unusual. Usually the maximum. I've still got a way to go. Moving to item 11.1, the PMO report. Could somebody move receipt, please? Councillors Carter, Councillor Dalgety, those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. You wish to take us through this, please?
Just probably highlighting a couple of things, but we can go through line by line. I did remove the amenities building because I feel like it was time to take it off. I'm still doing a closeout report for it. That will basically explain, how much in the budget we have come in and what outstanding small items we're still currently sorting out and finishing off. That was sort of more little extra pieces of scope rather than, major items. So
this is the now.
yes, yeah. And the other one that I've added on, just because I think there was interest there, is the Scott's Ferry pump, as an update. I thought it might make sense. It's timely to add on. But going through line by line, the centralization, I guess the exciting thing for us to report on this is that we have a new staff member starting with us next week.
And we're looking very much forward to having him on board. He'll be probably coming to the next council meeting as well, so that you can meet him all, and he will be taking over this project from me. And there's a report further in the council meeting on this matter. So if there's any questions, happy to answer. But
We'll meet that person in due course. Yeah. Right.
further to Ratana, I think my only pointing out thing here would be that we have this comment in there that we will be engaging the contractors once the section 92 response has been completed, which has now been completed. We had a few further questions that were popped up again from Horizons. What is really, I guess, crucial in this next step is that Horizons is going to be determining whether or not it will be a publicly notified or a limited notified consent. And we are hoping for the limited, because there are limited parties that are affected by this. And we have got feedback from the parties that they're happy with our endeavour in general. So there should be hopefully good grounds for this to be a limited process, which hopefully would mean it's not as, it potentially is not as drawn out as the other process.
When is that due to come before an environment committee, or will be just handled by planners?
So at the moment, we don't know that, but basically if a publicly notified process is taken on board, then there's a chance that anyone, of course, can reply to or make a submission to this project, and we don't quite know then what could happen. So that's a unknown really with all of these sort of consents, unfortunately. But if there's any questions,
So, do you know when Horizons will make that decision?
they were waiting for our response from the section 92, and that has been submitted just last week or earlier this week. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I'm hoping, but yeah, there's no guarantees. Moving on to Papakai Pump Station, we're still scheduled for the commissioning to be happening in the middle of April. So no further update on that matter.
I've got a question around that. I've had phone calls from a contractor, a nearby contractor, offering free soil.
Okay.
Presumably there would be a cartage cost. But to finish the landscaping of that, could somebody
It's been picked up. It's been picked
been
up.
picked up and having, I received the phone call as of today, so. All right, that's all from me with regard to that one.
Okay. And any further questions to the membrane upgrades that we've taken on? Again, there's just a few little tweaks to be done by me.
Councillor Hero, Councillor Davies, Councillor Hero.
I just wanted to make a comment around the Taipi Town Hall and library redevelopment. Just
Listed separately as further down the PMO.
sorry.
Come back to you, Councillor Davies.
Just clarification, really, the preferred vendor doing this type of work, is any other council using it?
So can you put up?
Guaranteed vote.
Yeah,
Oh, if any other council is using it,
in New Zealand, yeah.
I would have to go back and ask them to confirm that.
They gave an indication when they were here as to who else they were doing in New Zealand.
There's nobody in New Zealand. That was the indication they gave.
No, that was the specific process that was discussed. The company is a
And
New
follow
Zealand
that up.
company.
Well,
Yeah, I will follow that up, yeah.
Sorry, thank you,
Sure.
that'd be great.
Yes.
Sorry, I missaid that. Yeah. Next one.
Yep, Marton water strategy. We will,
Scottsfield pump.
it's after
We've
that.
got to that yet.
Oh,
Yeah.
Uh,
Just with that Scots Ferry pump, I gather that the generator is in sight, but not the actual pump.
So I've just had an update this week actually with some images that unfortunately I missed to not be able to put into this report, but the generator is on site and gated in a sort of fenced sheet type enclosure, I would say. And then the pump is also being lifted to the place already now, but there's some work to be done around the pump to secure that and make sure that it doesn't have any blockage easily happening. So they're still working through the process. Just a bit update. May they're completing it. Was there any questions with the Marton order?
Just a quick one for me, in your update. Decision on broadcasting storage sale to be made. I thought the decision had been made to sell, are we now deciding to store? The surplus casting, we had some additional casting, so we're not sure that we want to sell it now, or we?
So I think we can try to approach both. If we can sell it, we should. If we can't sell it, we should store it. So maybe it's not worded.
Okay, so that's a slight change from what we've read previously. So as the indication is, there's not a market to sell it, or you haven't actively tried.
We have tried, but through some of our, basically MDC has been trying for us because they've been working on this. There's a couple of new avenues that we are going to look at now to see if we can sell it through those avenues. We just want to continue to be active, trying to, because it will be one of those items that not constantly needed in the market, but it will be needed at some point by someone. And so we're trying to capture that moment.
Yeah, thank you.
Move on to Marton offices and library. I'm sure there's any questions in that space.
Any questions there?
It's all green.
Extra.
Taipei Town Hall and library redevelopment.
I just had a comment. Given that at a recent meeting, people can be assured that these things that have gone through an LTP process are still on. They haven't been dropped off.
Oh.
Correct.
Yeah.
There's just one from me. When reading the report, there's been a shortlisting process. Can that report come back to assets, please?
A report on
the shortlisting process?
So the process that we're looking at the moment is that there were 12 submissions received for the RI, which is really actually a good sign that there's interest in the market for this kind of work. And we've shortlisted the 4 best ones in this process. And they are currently going through a RFP process where they are submitting more information, and there will be an interview with them that we're conducting. And that happens to be like the day before the asset and infrastructure meeting. So we will be able to report back like with very fresh information.
What I'm asking for is that report and that evaluation come to assets, please.
Okay, I will check on the process, but yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, your worship, I've read this one, but first of all, great, 12 registrations of interest is fantastic. So I'm not sure what that tells us about the market as to whether or not suddenly we've got a really attractive project, or all of a sudden the market is very slow and we're going to become rapidly competitive. But I think it is quite worthwhile taking this back to assets, because I think as a council, as councillors across the board, and I'm not an expert in it, actually understanding this particular next stage of it. Once we've made the decision to say that, hey, first of all, we understand there's a need to do something. That decision was done some time ago. Then we've gone through a process of understanding what the financial implications are. We've debated that around and we've made that decision. This next stage, I think, should be understood by councillors in some more detail as to what does the next stage of you receiving these expressions of interest of 12, how do we get to 4, and what does that look like? Because I think as these projects come online more and more, I think we should have a greater understanding of them, and it may flow into our earlier discussion today about what does expressions of interest look like in the sale of those buildings down there. They're all sort of co-aligned, and I just think it'd be quite good to take that before we just get further down the line and look at the whole thing quite holistically as to how we've got from 12 to 4. How does that happen? I think it'd be good to understand it.
Thank you. Councillor.
I'd just like to express that I'd like to see that report to it, assets and infrastructure. As much information as we can read as councillors is important to understand the whole process rather than sort of an end result opinion.
Due to the fact that there will be confidential sort of information in there at the moment, given it's a active procurement process, we can probably bring it into the public excluded workshop.
It would certainly have to be public excluded. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. Next one.
Martin Red Hub. There's no real update on that, unfortunately.
I did chase that as to whether there'd be appeal, but I really wanted to get to the solicitor just to make sure that was the case, but I haven't been able to contact him.
Yeah. Interesting, at Zone, Shane Jones came online at Zone, and he specifically said in his catch up to myself, that he was keen to come back here with relevant staff at some stage. So I will chase him.
One question from me on this one, and possibly for the chief executive, your worship, and I appreciate if for some reason there's nothing further he can add, but I do note the due diligence process delayed by +3 months. Is that something?
Yeah, that was
We were expecting something around this time in March.
yeah. So when they went out to put an offer to the vendors as part of their condition, there was a possible extension for 3 months. So it's not something that's just new. It's something that they've invoked a right of, if you like.
Okay, thank you. Happy with that.
Anything else, councillor? Thank you very much. We now move to item number 12, the minutes from committees. They were on a separate thing within there. I'm hoping that somebody moves that we receive them as a block. Councillor Okawa, are you doing so?
Yes.
Seconded. Councillor Wilson. Those in favour?
No.
Those against? Carried. Would somebody like to move that we move into public excluded, please?
Happy to move for the reasons stated.
Thank you for the reasons stated. Councillor Loudon seconding. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. Thank you. Just before